Hello, Biblionauts. Welcome. Take a seat. Let's talk about why read the Phenomenology of the Spirit. I've said many things about Hegel in this channel, and none of them was good. And yet, here I am preparing you for a read along of Hegel's Phenomenology of the Spirit that will be happening very, very soon. So before opening this book, as it's often the case with philosophy, philosophy is very insecure. Philosophy spends the second half of its history explaining itself. Why do philosophy, right? Scientists don't need to answer that question because they don't have that insecurity, perhaps because the science is kind of like it has its answer in these results, the results that it presents, while philosophy only really presents problems that never really resolves. Perhaps, I don't know, just leaving things there. I'm gonna take this, as you probably can see, not very seriously. And I don't mean this video. I mean these last few months of me reading philosophy in my last part of university. I'm still an adept, or not an adept, but a big believer on the worth of reading philosophy. However, I am thoroughly disenchanted with it, as I was maybe not for a few years before coming to uni. By the time I came into university to study philosophy, I was already strongly against academic philosophy in the first place. It was just a logistical choice more than anything else. But now this guy represents pretty much everything I don't like about philosophy, especially in the sense of his obscurity, right? So what is here for someone who doesn't want to be spit in the face rhetorically or in terms of just bad prose every single line? What is in it for you, right? Well, in the first place, you do have to like philosophy. I'll make a case for other reasons why you would want to read this, but if you are interested in philosophy, then you have a lot more to receive from this, because Hegel is arguably, perhaps undeniably, the most important philosopher of the last 180 years or something like that, meaning Marxism, critical theory, many forms of sociology, existentialism, and of course, phenomenology, which is a part of philosophy that I am very interested on, and in which I also hate most of its writers. All of that started with him, either with him or against him, mostly against him. Postmodern thought is also kind of a reaction to Hegel, to his sort of like idea of absolute thinking that we will talk about as well. So if you are interested in the philosophical landscape of the last century and a half, then you kind of should read Hegel. It is true that philosophy, especially the best philosophy, the one that really permeates into the canon of philosophy, can be broken apart into a series of sentences. Maybe a quote, like if you, like most people in philosophical circles in universities in the UK has never read Hegel, they will only come to you and say thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And with that and a bit of creative input, most people is able to pretend to have read this book. You could be one of those people, of course, but you could also have done the conceptual, the rational, the brain lifting that this book requires, and that will give you, in my opinion, a lot more reward in terms of just sense of achievement to begin with. I did not enjoy reading Hegel, as you can see. This has already been on my hands. It's pretty much used copy in the worst and the best sense of the word, but that doesn't mean that I understood Hegel, and that's why I'm reading him again. I'm probably the second most arrogant philosopher in the history of philosophy after this guy, meaning that I can't finish university having not understood any book, to be fair, but this one in specific, because I've come across way too many self-absorbed teenagers that use this as sort of shield against any argument or something like that, or a way to just look over over their shoulders into other people. Of course, not me, because I take those people and I dissect them and I break them into pieces and then I wipe my ass with them. But even in my second language rather than my first. But still, I can't. There's a big conflict inside me when I read a book and I get to the end and I don't understand it. Even if I hate it, I kind of need to get through it. And that is part of the reason. That is part of the reason why you would want to read this book, because it's philosophy's contempt towards its readers, which has certain explanations. I already made a video of why I read philosophy at all. I'll link it in the description. But it's is that contempt that I perceive as contempt. Don't forget, like, for anyone here who actually knows what this book is about and who actually knows about philosophy, I'm just some guy, okay? Like, I just of course I do make fun of other philosophy students, but that doesn't mean that I have like a lot more understanding of philosophy as a whole. I am a student who didn't go to class most of the time because doesn't have much respect for his teachers. That doesn't mean that I consider myself to be an authority when it comes to Hegel or philosophy. I just consider myself to be smart enough to not listen to someone who has not read a book that they are teaching for the last 10 years. So that is my position. I'm just using common sense. I'm not using any sort of... I don't have access to certain understanding or a PhD level of knowledge when it comes to humanities of any kind. So that being said, maybe on minute 6, maybe I should have said that in the 6th second, because I'm sure there's gonna be a very long comment from someone correcting every single thing I say about this, and they only got through the first 10 seconds of the video. But whatever. As I said, you're welcome. Take a seat. Enjoy this parade of ignorance that is my channel. So yeah. Philosophy's contempt towards its readers, meaning its cryptic way of presenting any topic, is perhaps an example of its most valuable feature, which is, perhaps in other times it wasn't so useful to have someone tell you in 100 pages, in the worst possible sense, the most complex, unnecessarily complex way, something that they could say in 2 sentences. Perhaps it wasn't that useful, but today this is the opposite, is the counterpart of the aperitifs, the philosophical and mediatic aperitifs that you receive everywhere all the time. This is the opposite of TikTok. TikTok, it takes a big idea, a big thing, and they just like give it to you in 3 seconds. Everything is chewed up for you. They just vomit it like a pigeon directly into you. You don't have to do any digesting, any intellectual digesting when it comes to anything. And that's why most people, I feel like in some ways, as a society, we are in a process of retardation. As much as I might also be accused for being ableist for saying that, I don't care. I'm not politically correct. But yeah, I will always shield myself behind the moral stance of, sorry, it's not my first language, I probably meant something else. Whenever I say something that offends you, just know that, it's just because I don't speak English well enough, and probably I meant something. I meant the way of framing whatever sentence I said that offended you in the way that it would not have offended you. So just change it, reframe it in the way you want. Okay, yeah. Enough with that. So yeah, this is basically making some ideas that are not as complex way harder just because the guy wants. And then you have to do all the work. You have to take them apart, look at them, change their shape and form, and read them front to back, and jump back and forth in the book. And at the end, you get to the idea. It's like, it's not different than a puzzle, right? And in that sense, philosophy might not be reading, because reading is more linear. It has a narrative, it has a structure, and there's an art to it. This is the complete perversion of that art. And I don't think that is to say that it's not good. people sits down and makes puzzles. I don't know why. I've pretty much every single important person in my life loves puzzles. I don't love actual puzzles. I mean, I do love chess puzzles, although I'm really shit at it. But I don't love real puzzles. But the point is that why would you just break all of those pieces apart when you just can have the fucking picture without any complexity? Because of the lifting. Why would you go to the gym and do 100 squats when you could just stay in your house? Because if you do 100 squats, then you can go up that mountain that you wanted to go to. This is a philosophical. This is a brain gym. As duro as that sounds, it in some ways is. It takes a lot of work. That's why most people, even people who dedicate their lives doing to philosophy, or at least identify themselves as philosophy students or whatever, even then will not read this book. It's because it's hard. It is hard. I mean, I think that is undeniable. This is a hard book. Some people say it's the hardest book. I doubt that. The hardest book is always going to be the most culturally unrelatable to you, the most external, the most foreign. So the hardest book for you, if you are watching this video in English or whatever, is probably some like Hinduist mystic or something like that. It's never gonna be Hegel, which at the end of the day is very fucking Western. So yeah, I'd say that making things hard for you when it comes to this is an exercise that if you are to come on the other side understanding the book, not only do you have a sense of achievement that you will make you feel like you can pretty much get through any other book, and only for that it's already worth it. Because if you read this book and you understand it, if you ever wanted to read another book that people is like, oh my god, this is a chunker, this looks like a hard book to read, I don't know, Gravity's Rainbow or Infinite Jest or whatever is a book that whatever floats your boat, well, then you will be like, I mean, I read the Phenomenology of Spirit, I can get through that. But on top of that, also, if you are interested in philosophy, in overall conversation, you will also understand that. And just more generally, having access to that kind of brain exertion to be able to exercise your cognitive capacity in that way will just be helpful in every other way, really. Whenever someone gives you a series of premises that is completely fallacious, you will not feel like the hard of tracing back those premises to the moment in which there is a fallacy, with all the thinking that sometimes requires, depending on how complex it is. Might feel easier. I don't know. I mean, that's just a thought. I do think that to a degree this can be a palestra. Palestra, is the Greek gyms where people want to think and work out simultaneously. In the symposium, which is Plato's most famous dialogue, maybe, Socrates is not only looked at as an idyllic figure because of his intellect or capacity to explain himself and morals, but also because after a whole party drinking more than anyone, he wakes up and goes to the gym. And Plato, Plato is actually not the real name of Plato, the most famous philosopher and most important philosopher that has ever been. It's also an alias. It's not his real name. It's the name that they gave him because he had a very wide back, like 2 plates on his back. Because he was working out all day. So yeah, philosophy is very much Dubro history. But that is not to say that there is nothing good to get from here. I think that being mentally fit as well as physically fit has some benefits if you remove all the bullshit. And I am here to remove the bullshit because if anything, you can count on me not to be condescending or taking something for granted. I'm not gonna be sort of like looking over my shoulder to get the approval of all my philosophical peers or anything like that. I'm just gonna be reading this as a reader, very naively or innocently, in the sense that like I am not. When I'm reading this, I'm not gonna be concerned with whether or not this is important to Kant, or a good continuation of Kant, or is important to Marx or anything like that, and why that makes it a great book. That makes it a great book if you are interested in philosophy, but that doesn't make it a great book in itself. It makes it a great piece on a greater whole, and that is a reason why it can be valuable to read, but it's still individually a piece of shit, at least as I remember. However, again, the hardest of all pieces of shit that you could read, and with those with those two benefits. Hegel, let's talk about a bit about Hegel. Hegel wrote about many things, but generally throughout his life, he was like focused on building his ideology. Yes, I say ideology because philosophy, especially systematic philosophy, is ideology, just like religion, to a degree at least. He wrote about logic and science and history, of course, and aesthetics. But this was the first and most important book. And although at the end of having written all of those books, he was able to sit back and kind of through his own lens, through the system that he had built, explain or see sort of like the reasons for everything that happens in reality as he thought that he was doing, which is kind of like what ideology does. It's like you take some VR lenses that show you your own perspective on reality, and now you can apply those axioms to everything, and suddenly everything makes sense. It's a series of thoughts, of arguments that work in consonance so well that you can apply them to different things in reality, so that they give you a comprehensive explanation for the world. It's of course one of my least favorite things about philosophy, which is the epistemological arrogance, which I think is something that we are kind of starting to get rid of within this discipline, because nothing can be explained, like not everything can be explained through any framework that we can create. The world is way beyond us. It might as well be like, I don't believe in the supernatural, but it might as well exist in the sense that the natural goes so far beyond what we're able to comprehend or will ever be able to comprehend. So I guess I'm not like I'm not super humanist in that sense. But yeah, I mean, that being said, he was building this ideology, and the phenomenology is not only the first piece, but it's one of the most important ones because it provides the methodology. Hegel saw sort of like reality as equal to reason. Anything that was not rational was not real. And once he saw that sort of like net of reason in reality, he thought, okay, so if I sort of trace the different concepts in reality, he going from the micro to the macro, in the sense of like what he called sense certainty. Wait, I have a note here. Sensible certainty. Meaning like the limited perspective of consciousness, like what you just have, the immediate reality that you have. We could arrive at what he wanted to arrive, which is absolute knowing. That is done by making sense of that skeleton of the reason of reality, by discerning it through that leap, and that was done through dialectics, which I think is one of the most interesting creations or appropriations of philosophy, which is the mediation between contrasts. We think in dualism, right? Black and white, high and low, hot and cold, justice and law, individuality and universality, which is a big one in philosophy. And the problem is that when we do reason, when we do philosophy, or in general, we find ourselves in one of the two sides, right? And then if we are brave enough to look on the other side, we realize that we both have a similar partiality. Things are not black or white, right? So dialectics is the art of mediating between these two, rather than arguing only unilaterally from one side, in order to arrive at a conclusion that emerges from whatever is of value in both sides. It's your friends separate into guys who are fighting, and making you make pieces, and then like, let's go have a beer. I don't know if that is a very good metaphor or example, but it's not that hard really. Like people says, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, which were supposed to be realized through generations in history, as the different parts of a process in which we arrive at that absolute knowing, at like the absolute realization of the absolute spirit. Truth itself, it's very metaphysical, which is to say very religious. I think a better way of saying it is thesis, negation, and negation of negation. It's more accurate, but it's not a big deal. I feel like the synthesis part gives a better. Is easier to understand if you haven't read the book yet. But that's sort of like the methodology through which tracing this hidden rationality in reality, one could arrive from our limited perception into the absolute knowing, through which he was going to be able to eventually, or at least this is his project, explain the whole of reality. I think that phenomenology, as the study of that sort of like sense perception, embodied life and existence, and Marxism and many other isms that came after Hegel are very interesting and have a lot to say. And you don't have to embody any ism or be a Hegel fan in order to not enjoy necessarily, although I do enjoy deciphering these kind of books. But just take whatever makes sense to you and use the rest as tools for understanding other thoughts, or maybe. Yeah, what I'm saying is that this is not sacred. It shouldn't be treated as such. I feel like it often is. Especially the approach of many philosophy teachers is that to present this to you as literally the fucking body of Christ. You cannot do anything to it. You cannot pollute it in any way. And all that they want you is to understand this book and to live by it. It's a lot of indoctrination in philosophy, especially with philosophers that are very specialized. And I think that is the worst side of philosophy. I will make more videos about what I think philosophy should be. But definitely the concept of dialectic is something that you can take as a takeaway, in the sense of like looking at the mediation between two extremes. Everything is framed in a dualist sense. Now in postmodernity we call it sort of like the I and the other. And I am also doing some readings on ecology and stuff, and I'll also talk about how that affects our visions on like nature and non-human animals. But we'll talk about that in the future. I just wanted to say that I don't know that I have been very convincing. I definitely have not promised here that you will arrive at absolute knowing when you finish this. If you do, let me know, because it would be cool to do some absolute knowing together and see why that is completely bullshit. But yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be reading this. I'm gonna do a read along of Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. I'm not forcing you to follow through, but if you want it, you might find your philosophical biceps to be much more developed at the end. I'll also try to give you some resources for secondary reading. I'm not a big fan of secondary reading. I pretty much don't do any. If anything, I watch two lectures or something online, which I will also try to link throughout the journey reading this. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I don't think I have anything else to say. These are all my arguments to read Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. It's hard, and doing hard things is good for you. And you might understand a little bit more the perspective of like the overall dialogue in philosophy on the last 150 years, which is, in my opinion, the most interesting one on the history of philosophy. And that's all. Like, apart from all of that, you will also enjoy probably seeing me struggle, understanding things that you may have understood more easily, and it would be helpful to have other people interacting when it comes to this book, because I'm gonna do a lot of heavy lifting by myself, meaning that I'm gonna do a lot of guesswork as well here, because this guy requires some guesswork, and I'll probably get many things wrong, and maybe some of you are able to tell me why they are wrong, and in which page have I missed that doesn't necessarily represent or that is very important for the conclusion that I was arriving at, or anything like that. So yeah, this can be a more interactive read along than normal. It's just gonna be me grappling with this and trying to put an end to philosophy in my life for the years to come. Not philosophy, but this kind of philosophy, systematic academic philosophy, which, as I said, to me, it's is not very different from ideology. It disguises itself as sort of like serving reason, and it disguises itself as sort of like open to discourse and reconstruction. But in reality, it is not. It is philosophy is often autobiography, as Nietzsche said, and philosophy is often indoctrination. And as much as today we don't necessarily have that kind of philosophy anymore, because systematic philosophy is out of fashion. Although I have seen some philosophical systems coming out in the last couple of years that I do find interesting again, because at the end of the day, this is just some guy. It's not very different from like the City of God from Augustine, in the sense that like it's just some guy trying to explain the world. And if his brain is big enough, if his time and capacity of work capacity is big enough, then it can be very interesting to see how did this guy make sense of the world, right? We have many sacred books. I'm not gonna mention any because I don't want to generate more hate than this channel will eventually get by everything that I have already said until now. Many sacred books are that as well. Sometimes together, many different people came to write this one book that has influenced our society so much, or an individual, a prophet or something comes and tells you how the world exists. Is myth creating, and I am not saying that all of philosophy is necessarily superstitious or this guy's theology, but a lot of it is, and definitely any systematic philosophy at some point or other has to rely on a similar with way less self-awareness than religion, has to rely on a similar tool, which is faith. At some point, any philosopher arrives at his own limitations, and inevitably either has to throw the system off the window or accept that limitation and maintain and as an action, basically. Every philosophy at some point has an action that doesn't have an explained premise or a justifiable premise. And we'll see which one is in Hegel's case, but I can tell you already from now that in advance that you will not discover absolute knowing or anything like that in this book. This is just a book from a guy who believed himself to be really cool and really smart and better than you, and thought that he could teach you how to read the world. And if some guy came to you now and told you that, you tell him to fuck off, right? So maybe don't, because this guy wrote a few pages on it and spent quite a while, and it can be interesting, like it's just like sometimes I meet some wacky, interesting characters when I travel, and they will tell me about like this new drug that they discovered, and I show them a new world in which everything is made of clay. And then they tell me about how through their psychedelic trip they understood the nature of reality, right? Some people sometimes has very interesting anecdotes to tell, as much as they are just invented and don't make any sense. You can take this as that. You can take this as some interesting guy with some interesting ideas presenting them to you. That is if its place in the philosophical landscape and its capacity to challenge you intellectually is not enough. There is also the aspect of just seeing him and me through the book grapple with a system that tries to explain more than can be explained by a single human or by humanity as a whole. Yeah, I guess that's all I had to say. That's Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. I don't know when I will start it. I know that it will take me months because I'm not gonna read this book like I normally read books, meaning sit down 8 hours today, 8 hours tomorrow, and be done. I have many other books that are much more a bigger priority for me. So I can't promise that I will make a video weekly. I will try to make a video weekly, okay? And I will probably start next week or the week after, latest. Probably next week, because because I think it's nice. If I do it week, by March I should be done. Meaning all the month of February, basically. And you can join at any point. The first I'll probably title each part by its by whatever thought or concept or argument is being presented, and I'll try to make them kind of like set pieces, so that if you are interested in a certain thing about the phenomenology of spirit, we can talk about that without you necessarily having read the previous chapters and chapters after, because I'm not expecting anyone really to get through the whole book with me. But if you are, let me know. It'd be cool to know that there is someone that's actually gonna try to attempt this simultaneously at the time that I am doing it, or maybe further in time. These videos stay floating in the YouTube cosmos forever, or at least until humanity expires. So yeah, I mean, that's all I had. This is what I have for today. That's my last bullet, probably my last bullet in my philosophical gun. And yeah, I think I've spoken enough. I've rambled a little bit as well. I'm sorry. This video could have been shorter, but I have no script. I have no intention to put any more production in my videos than what you see. I think that makes them a bit longer, perhaps a little bit less coherent than most people's videos in YouTube. But I think that it also makes them perhaps a little bit more honest and real. I try to be as honest and real as I can, as much as this screen allows me. And yeah, if you come to this video and you are not subscribed, please subscribe. It's cool to know that there is people behind this, and that's one of the ways I have to know that there is actual humans and not just bots watching this. So yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say anything else. I'll be back. I'll be back with some heavy cerebral stuff concerning Hegel. And until then, thank you, and I'll see you on the other side.